For 2 whole years, World War II was tearing the globe apart. But America, we stayed out of it. So what was the tipping point? What finally pushed the United States into the biggest war in human history? Well, let's get into it.
It really all boils down to one single shocking moment. And these words from President Franklin D. Roosevelt, they just say it all. A date which will live in infamy. You see it here, over this gut-wrenching image of the USS Arizona in flames. That quote, it just perfectly captures the shock, the anger, everything that would finally drag a very reluctant nation into a world war.
Okay, but a day like that, it doesn't just come out of nowhere, right? It wasn't some random event. The attack on Pearl Harbor was really the explosive finale to a story that had been building for almost 100 years. So to really get why it happened, we've got to go back. We have to trace the path that led to war.
So check out this timeline. It is just staggering how fast Japan transformed itself. I mean, think about it. In 1853, U.S. warships basically force a feudal, totally isolated Japan to open its doors to the world. And Japan's response? Whoa! They launch the Meiji Restoration, and in just a few decades, they become this incredible industrial and military powerhouse. Fast forward to the 1930s, and Japan is hungry for resources to fuel its new empire. So they go on the march, invading Manchuria and then launching a full-scale invasion of China. And this, right here, created a massive clash of worldviews. I mean, look at it from Japan's side. They were thinking, hey, we're just building an empire, exactly like you Western nations did for centuries. They felt completely betrayed when the very same countries, who had their own huge empires, turned around and condemned them for doing the same thing. But for the U.S. and its allies, it was a totally different story. They saw Japan as a dangerous, brutal aggressor, especially with what was happening in China, and a threat to the entire world order. So by the time we get to the late 1930s, early 40s, you can just feel the tension. These two opposing views put Japan and the United States on a direct collision course. Things were about to get ugly. All right, so this is how it all went down. These are the final steps that made war pretty much inevitable. First, Japan pushes into French Indochina, trying to grab resources. The U.S. pushes back, sending aid to China and moving its Pacific Fleet to Pearl Harbor as kind of a show of force. But here's the real kicker, step 3. In July 1941, the U.S. slaps Japan with a crippling oil embargo. This cut off their lifeblood. For Japan's military leaders, this was basically an act of war. They had a choice, either give up their empire or go to war to get the oil they desperately needed. Well, they chose war.
And that brings us right back to that Sunday morning. Now that we have all this context, we can see the attack for what it really was. It wasn't just a random surprise assault. No, it was a calculated, even desperate gamble by Japan to save its empire. So picture it, early morning, December 7th. Most of the sailors and soldiers at Pearl Harbor are still asleep. It's a quiet Sunday. Now, U.S. intelligence knew something was probably coming, but they were looking in the wrong place. They figured the attack would hit the Philippines, not Hawaii. They were caught completely, totally off guard. History can feel distant, but then you read something like this quote from Donald Stratton, a serviceman on the USS Arizona. It just drops you right into the middle of the horror of that morning. Bombs were going off everywhere. It's a raw, powerful reminder of the real human cost behind all the dates and facts.
And that human cost, it was just staggering. In that single attack, over 2,400 American military personnel were killed. The physical damage was also just devastating. 188 U.S. planes were destroyed, most of them before they even had a chance to take off. And get this, the entire attack, all that death and destruction, it was all over in just 90 minutes. Unbelievable. The very next day, a stunned and furious nation listened as President Roosevelt addressed Congress. And what you're looking at here is so cool. It's his first draft. You can actually see his own handwriting where he crosses out a date which will live in world history and changes it to the iconic phrase we all know, a date which will live in infamy. It's such a small edit, but it's so much more powerful. It perfectly captured how betrayed and determined the country felt. The attack on Pearl Harbor really changed everything, almost instantly. It unleashed these two incredibly powerful and kind of conflicting forces in America. On one hand, this huge unifying wave of patriotism, and on the other, a really ugly wave of fear and prejudice.
And this is the key takeaway here. Just like that, overnight, the decades-long American policy of isolationism, of staying out of everyone else's wars, was completely shattered. The attack united the country in a way nothing else could have. Just look at the vote in Congress to declare war. It was practically unanimous.
These two images, side by side, they tell the whole story of America's response. On one side, you have this recruitment poster. It stands for the hundreds of thousands of Americans who rushed to sign up and fight. But then, you look at the other side. A photo of an internment camp. It's a stark symbol of the fear and racism that was aimed squarely at Japanese Americans right here at. And this quote, this just makes that injustice feel so horribly real. Richard Kurosawa was only 14 years old when his family was forced from their home. And his memory? The smell of the horse stables they were forced to live in. It's a humiliating detail that says so much about how these families were treated.
And the scale of this was just massive. We're talking about over 130,000 people. And the majority of them, they were American citizens. They were rounded up and imprisoned with no evidence, no trials, nothing. It was based purely on their race. It's without a doubt one of the darkest chapters in American history. So that leaves us with this final, really important question that comes straight from our research. What role did racism play in how the U.S. responded to Pearl Harbor? You know, the attack pushed America into a global war to fight tyranny, but at the same time, it brought out some of the deepest prejudices we had at home. It's a complicated legacy for sure, and it makes you think about how patriotism and fear can lead a country to do both incredible and truly shameful things. Definitely something to reflect on.